Hi, my name is Tripper Wood with PuppyTrainingSuccess.com. Over the last 20 years, I've run LabPups.com, and in addition to the breeding aspect of that business, I've also trained thousands of dogs. Primarily labs, but also golden retrievers, some of your doodles, your golden doodles and your labradoodles, as well as many other various breeds. In this training program, what you can expect is that you're going to learn the tips and tricks that I use, and they're really not tricks so much as technique and proven techniques and a posturing and a mental preparedness and how you need to come across to your dog. But you're going to be able to watch the training course and emulate me, and I know 100% that if you follow the training program, you're going to be able to learn to train your dog, and you're going to be a better owner. Your dog's going to respect you and listen to you, and I'm going to teach you all of the techniques that I use, as well as the posturing and the attitude that you need to have and the right mindset, so that you can be successful in training your new puppy, whether it be a Labrador or a Golden, any other breed. Doesn't really matter. All dogs pretty much boil down to really the same set of being consistent, and the same principles of being consistent and also being persistent, and making sure that you're firm and you don't let your dog get away with not performing. But I'm going to cover all of the tips that you need to be successful in this training course. Setting yourself up for success. In this module, what I want to convey to you is the mindset that you need to have in order to have a successful outcome in training. So you would want to make sure that you're in an enclosed space like your backyard or garage. Most people don't think you can train in your house too. It's a great environment. A lot of comfortability in your house too. So that could be a very good scenario to kind of think about. The dog is comfortable, not used to performing in the house, but you make the dog perform in the house, and then you will be able to reinforce the commands in an environment that the dog normally doesn't have to perform commands or isn't trained in that environment. So inside the house is actually a really good idea. What you don't want is to go out in the front yard without a fence, and then the neighbor comes walking out their house with their little chihuahua, and your dog takes off running, and you spend half the time that you had allotted for training chasing your dog down, and you've just blown all of 20-30 minutes on trying to get the dog. So you want to make sure that you have a couple of things. One is a prong training collar, which you will be able to see in the descriptions beside this video. A 6-foot nylon leash or leather leash, take your pick, it doesn't matter. A 50-foot leash that you can work on the sit, stay, and come command at a 50-foot distance. And then also possibly a training check stick. So those are some of the tools that I use. In more advanced training, you would want to have a remote collar, but that is a module that would be later on in the training. But for now, what you really want to focus on is make sure that you have the tools necessary to make sure that the dog will perform when you need that dog to perform, while training the techniques that I'm going to teach you to train. Basic terminology. In this module, you're going to learn the commands and how those commands should look like. So when I tell a dog to sit, I'm not expecting the dog to heel first. I just want the dog to sit down. So maybe I'm getting ready to feed him, and I just want sit, and then I can put the food down. I want the dog to go down in a sitting position. Dogs can have a couple of different seating positions. Some dogs will sit what I call pretty sit, where they're sitting directly over their haunches and they are just sitting straight down. Some dogs, when they sit, they kick their legs off to the side. Either way is fine. It doesn't matter. The dog just needs to perform that command, and it needs to do it quickly. So within 3 seconds, 5 seconds at most, but really I like to see that dog perform the command between 1 and 3 seconds with a maximum of 5 before I have to intervene. The stay, pretty much the same thing. I want the dog to, generally I tell the dog to sit and stay, But those are two separate commands, so it is important to pause. So it's sit and stay. I generally, for the stay command, I hold up my hand. And I will turn my back to the dog. Also, I want the dog to sit and stay there, whether I'm turning my back or if I'm fronting them or if I'm cornering them, if I'm going around them. So the dog shouldn't move. If you find that your dog is getting up and inching towards you, your dog is not trained to stay. Your dog needs to be tied to something so that it stays in one spot, you know, at least in the training part of it, which I'll cover in a later module. But if your dog is not staying in one spot, then that dog is not trained to stay. Your dog needs to sit and stay in one spot when commanded. So the come command is very much like all the other commands, is very basic in the idea, but very strict on the way that it's performed. When I tell a dog to come, the hand signal is I generally give a hand motion like this. I want the dog to come straight to me in a straight line and to sit down in front of me. That is how I deem the dog is performing the come command and completing the come command. It is important when the dog completes that command that you praise the dog, or if you intend to praise the dog, don't do it before the dog has fully completed the command. Interrupting that dog in the process of completing the command will teach the dog to come to you and generally stand there and not sit down in front of you. It's important that when the dog comes to you, it sits in front of you because the dog is now ready for the next command. So the heel command, what the heel command looks like, it's probably one of my favorite commands because I can also use the heel command a lot like the come command. And you're going to see this in the video explaining this, but the heel command is always on my left side. I want the dog to come to my left side, and if I'm moving, to keep pace with me. If I'm standing still, I want the dog to sit down beside me, seated, and that's the heel command. So the dog shouldn't be too far in front of me, shouldn't be too far behind me, and shouldn't be too far to the left of me, and it's always on the left. Unless I have also trained the dog to heel on my right. Special circumstance, I was working with a fellow that had a prosthetic leg. It was easier for him to have the dog on his right, so I first taught his dog to heel on the left, then I taught him a right heel was the command to heel on the right. You can alter these commands from what the dog already has learned, and you can add to them to suit your needs, but this is the basics. This is where you should start off so that you can then expand from what you've learned. Sitting strategies. In this module, you're going to learn the strategies that I use to teach the sit command. When working with either a new pup or an adolescent or an adult dog, they're going to require a different set of specifics per each age group. Typically, if you're working with a puppy, you're going to teach, when you say sit, you're teaching English, so you're teaching that dog a new language. You're teaching that dog that the language then relates to an action and how that action should be executed. So when I teach a dog to sit, I'll usually say sit, and I'll usually lift their head, super important. That maintains the positive, confident posture of the dog. I find that dogs that dip their head tend to be less confident, and that affects the performance of the dog. So this is something that I don't really cover this a lot of times when I'm working with people one-on-one because it's just so much information, but I'm telling it to you here now. This is one of the secrets that I've learned in training. So if the dog is dipping its head, I'll lift its head and I'll say sit, and I'll push its rear end down. I want to make sure that dog stays confident, because a dog that starts to lose its confidence will start to dip in performance. That's the first thing I'll do. I'll also use a couple of strategies. I'll use maybe a collar, and I'll pull up on the collar in leash and push the rear end down. Some dogs will perform the sit automatically, just naturally. Dogs do have a tendency to just randomly sit on their own, and if you can catch a dog that does that and you can say sit and then good boy, then you're going to reinforce something that they're already doing. It'll save you so much work. If you are lucky enough to have that happen, take advantage of it. Super important. So other than that, the sit is pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy. One of the things too is when I tell a dog to sit, I don't want the dog laying down. So if I find that I'm telling the dog to sit, but then after 3 or 4 seconds, especially if it's hot out, the dog or puppy may tend to want to lay down, you're going to have to pull that dog up. You're going to have to make it go to the sitting position. You never want to teach a dog that it's okay to not listen to you or to fulfill a command, but then to break away from doing that command and do something that they want to do, because that then becomes a disobedient dog. It's not listening to you. It's kind of listening to you and it's kind of performing the command, but then it's saying, you know what, I really don't care what you're telling me what to do. I'm going to do what I want to do. And it could be circumstance where it's just hot and the dog's tired, so take that into consideration. And if you're working with your dog, for your puppy rather, for more than 15 or 20 minutes, your dog will get mentally exhausted. It is best at that point where you see performance dip to try to end training on a good note, so that it doesn't feel like you're pushing a wet noodle. All right, you will feel like that if you continue working with your pup. It won't get better. Trust me. I've worked with so many dogs that everything's going well, and then all of a sudden the dog knows how to sit and stay and come and heel, and then it just stops performing. It's because the dog mentally is exhausted. It's best to just end training on that note. Try to end on a positive note where you can praise the dog and then come back to it later. That's the best thing. Stay strategies. In this module, you're going to learn the techniques that I use to get a dog to stay in one spot so that I can go on to the next command. So this really may be a sit and stay strategy because it really does work in conjunction, but I'm going to try to break it down into just the stay and focus on that, so that it breaks it away so that you can study it and then you can move on to the next module. So
let's try that one more time, the introduction.
Okay. Stay strategies. In this module, you're going to learn the techniques that I use to get a dog to stay. So first off, I usually will work with a dog on heel and warm them up. And heel meaning when I'm walking and I stop, they automatically sit down. So I'll take a dog on a walk for about 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes, just to get them warmed up. I find that it really helps. A puppy generally, or even an adolescent dog, will generally not perform well for the first minute or so, but when you go through the commands and you're you're reminding them what it is that they've learned, then you can go on to either teaching them something new or reinforcing something they've already learned that you need to work on. So in the stay strategy, after you've warmed up your dog, I like to get a dog to stay in one spot, give them the hand signal. I want to take the leash and collar that should already be on them and tie them to something like a fence, like the picket of a fence, or you can just use something that's stationary. So the idea is you want to tell the dog to sit and stay, and then you want to go some distance away from that dog and have the dog not be able to come to you, not to be able to run off. The dog should be secured in that location. So one of the things that I like to do is I will tell the dog to sit and stay, or just stay, and I'll turn my back and I'll walk away from the dog, and I'll really, in my head I'm counting 1, 2, 3, and then I'll turn around and I will reinforce the command and say stay. Because you don't want to train your dog to stay only when you're facing him. You want to be able to train your dog to be versatile and turn your back to your dog. So keep that in mind. Keep versatility in your mind. Be able to train to be able to have your dog perform in a variety of situations. So life is not hunky-dory. Life is not quiet and calm. So you want to make sure that you add some distractions in. You want to make sure you add some diversity in your training so that it's not the same quiet sit and stay and you're going 10, 15 feet and you're always facing your dog. You turn your back to your dog. And this will be the greatest test to see if your dog is actually going to stay, because when you turn your back to your dog, your authority starts to decrease, and the ability to control your dog starts to decrease when you turn your back to the dog. The dog is going to think you're going to leave him or her. It's going to have a tendency to want to get up and come to you. So that's why it's important to count to 3 to 5, turn around and remind the dog to stay. And I generally, this is another secret that I've learned, is I'll say stay, and I'll say good boy or good girl. Good, maybe call them by the name, but I generally find that just use the gender terminology, good boy, good girl, and then I'll turn my back and continue on to the spot where I know I need to teach the dog to stay to. So if I'm working on 20 feet or 50 feet, I'm going to remind the dog every couple of seconds until I get to that spot. Then I'm going to pause, and I'm going to look at my watch, and I'm going to count how many seconds the dog will stay seated before the dog gets distracted, gets up and tries to come to me. So I'm going to be able to test and see how long the attention span is at that point. Also, if the dog is getting up and kind of sniffing around, you're going to have to remind the dog the command, which is the stay command, and if he doesn't respond, you're going to have to go back to the dog. Ideally, so this is what I'll do. I'll tell the dog to stay, and let's just say that I'm 10-15 feet away and the dog is getting up. I'm going to go, that's enough, sit down. So I'm disciplining the dog for getting up, and then I'm reminding the dog to sit down and stay, realizing that I'm probably going to have to close some distance to get back to the dog to get the dog to perform the stay command. But this is all part of the strategy in allowing the dog some room to make some mistakes, but you're controlling the outcome because the dog cannot come to you because he's tied to something. So you'll just be prepared. You're going to have to probably do this repetition several times. And if I'm telling a dog to sit and stay, and I find that every time I get to 15 feet, the dog is getting up, don't keep doing the same thing over and over expecting a different result. You're going to have to make a change after 2 times. If you tell a dog sit and stay and you go to 15 feet and the dog, every time you get to that mark in the ground, the dog is getting up, the next time you go there, the dog's probably going to get up. You need to kind of think ahead and be able to preemptively stop the dog from getting up. This is the secret that I do when I'm working with a dog. If I get to 15 feet, I'll go back and reset the dog and get him to sit and stay. Then I'll know as I'm approaching that mark, which he got up last time, he's probably going to do it again. I'm going to be ready. I'm going to go, sit down. And if I can catch him before the dog actually fully gets up, and usually, I would say 9 times out of 10, the dog will sit back down. I'll say, good boy, stay. So I'll praise and then follow up with reiterating the command. And then when I get to that mark, I'm going to look at my watch and I'm going to count off about 15 or 20 seconds. I'm going to just see how long the dog will sit and stay there. And I'm watching the dog, and I might, every so often, I might just remind him, stay. I'm going to make sure that I'm providing that positive reinforcement. And then I'll walk back to the dog and I'll praise the dog for staying. Good job. I will do that 3 times in a row before I move on to the come command, because I want to make sure that the dog really knows sit and stay, me going to 15, 20, 30 feet and not moving. So this is one of the biggest part of the training is the stay command. Like, how do you do it? If you follow what I've just showed you in the company video, you're going to be able to do it. And it's magical too. Once you do it, once you follow these steps, it works. It works really well. Come strategies. In this module, you're going to learn the way that I get a dog to perform the come command. So your dog at this point should know sit and stay. And I generally work on sit, stay, and come all at the same time. So when I'm working with a pup, I'll teach heel, sit, stay, and come. I'll kind of go through all the commands. And after getting a dog to sit and stay, when I say come, what needs to be on your dog is a prong training collar and a leash. So what I'm going to expect is that when I say the come command, I'm going to put some pressure on the leash. And if the dog fights me, you'll feel if the dog is starting to pull back to sit in its spot, you want to pull that dog to you. You want to get him to come straight to you and sit down in front of you. And then the next thing I do is I say sit and stay. But if the dog's sitting, you just say stay, and you back up the length of the leash, and you pause, and then you say come. And you put some pressure on the leash. Take that slack out and put some pressure on. See if the dog will come to you. If not, pull the dog to you. After about 3 or 4 times of having to pull the dog to you, the next time you put some pressure on the leash, bet you the dog is going to start to come, and you say, good boy, and you pull the slack out of the leash, encouraging them to come to you. And when they come to you, they need to sit down in front of you. So this is close quarter come command. When you start to get further distances, you need to have a 50-foot leash or a 50-foot rope with a clasp on it. That's what I use. And it's kind of the same technique with the short leash. And then the next upgrade from that would be a remote collar, and you're teaching the dog to sit, stay, and come. You're more reinforcing and increasing the distance at that point with a remote collar. But the collar, whether it be the prong training collar and the leash or the remote training collar, allows you to quickly and as close to instantly correct or discipline that dog if a dog isn't performing. So if you say come and the dog, I've had this happen, where you say come and the dog looks at you and then it turns its head and it wants to go the opposite direction, because puppies do tend to like to get out of performing. It's kind of like children. They want to see what they can, how far they can push the envelope. You need to be able to have a leash on that dog so you can correct them and you can preemptively try to head that off the next time that might happen. And really, when you tell the dog to come, you want to teach the puppy to come to you as soon as you say it. So keep that in mind. Every time you say come, emphasizes by tugging on the leash. You want them to think going forward that every time they hear the come command, that they instinctively, they feel, even though you may not have a collar on them in the future, that they feel, that they remember that training, that pressure on their neck to come to you, and that will really help reinforce the come command. You never want to train your dog to the come command or any command without a leash and collar on. It's really setting yourself up for disaster. If your dog's loose in your house and you tell the dog to come and you don't have a leash on that dog and the dog doesn't perform, you need to go get that dog. And in being in the house, it makes it a lot easier, but you need to go get that dog and grab him by the collar and pull him to you, because in your house will relate and it will spill over to being outside. And if you don't train your dog or reinforce the training in your house to the commands, whether it be sit, stay, come, or heel, how can you expect your dog to perform those commands in your yard or in a public space? So really, it's all about the mindset and the posturing of and the ability to make your dog perform these commands as soon as you tell them, as soon as you speak them. And you're reinforcing, you're supporting yourself by making sure that the dog is performing these commands as soon as you give the command, and you're not allowing the dog to ignore the command. The dog will know you will make them perform the command, and that's super important. Heel strategies. In this module, you're going to learn the way that the heel command can be taught.
Try it again.
Heel strategies. In this module, you're going to learn the strategies that I use to teach a puppy and an adult dog and an adolescent dog how to heel, and what that should also look like too. I'm very specific about this command, And it's a really cool command if you can effectively teach your dog. So follow the steps and you're going to learn how to train your dog, and once you get this mastered, you're going to look pretty cool. So
let's do that intro one more time.
Heel strategies. In this module, you're going to learn how I teach a dog how to heel. So when I tell a dog to heel, what that looks like is the dog is on my left side, and and of course I've got a training collar and a leash on that dog for the majority of the training process. It's only after the dog has mastered it, usually after working with the dog for between 2 and 3 weeks, that I could expect the dog to perform that command without a leash and collar on. So for the first 2 weeks, exclusively, I'm using a prong training collar and a leash. In some cases, a slip lead, but it's most effectively with a prong training collar and a 6-foot leash. So it's always on my left. So when I tell a dog to heel, I expect the dog to keep pace with me. This is what I always tell my clients when I'm working with them: make the dog move to you, don't move to the dog. So what I mean by that is, when I say heel, I expect the dog to come to my left side and either sit down or to keep pace with me if I'm walking. I'm not going to move to the dog. I want the dog to move to me. That's super important. You would not believe how many owners I see that say heel and they move over to the dog. No, you need to make the dog move to you. Ultimately, you are the alpha dog in the situation. The dog needs to please you. The dog needs to obey you. You aren't a slave. You're not a subservient to the dog. The dog is subservient to you. That's the relationship here. You need to make the dog perform. And how is the dog supposed to learn how to perform if you're doing all the work? No, the dog needs to do the work. So when you say heel, the dog comes to your left side and sits down. Granted, you're stationary. If you're moving, so if you're walking already and you say heel, that dog needs to come to your left side and fall in beside you, keeping pace. So I like to look down, and I'll notice that the shoulders of the dog are pretty even with the middle of my stride. So the head is going to stick beyond my legs, and that's acceptable for me, because when stopping, that dog will sit and the dog's legs will be even with mine, and the head will be directly under my hand, pretty much. So that's how I like to see the heel perform. Also, some of the strategies that I use in the heel command are, I might pick up a stick just off the ground, and I might wave that stick in front of the dog's nose. That might be another way that I teach the heel command, because a lot of times puppies have a tendency to walk faster than the owner. Occasionally they will lag behind, but primarily what I find is they're wanting to surge ahead. And it's our job to teach them to keep pace with us and to slow down and walk with us and not be out in front of us, 2, 3, 4 paces. So that's one of the techniques that I like to use. If I find, I can always pull up on the training collar. I can always pull up but I like to have several different methods of achieving the same command. And plus, it gives some variety too. I might pick up a little stick and just kind of wave it in front of the dog's nose, and the dog will see that and instinctively pull back. Another thing I can use is the reason why I like a 6-foot nylon or leather leash is I can swing the end of that leash in front of the dog's nose too. So the dog will see that coming and will pull back. So I can always pull up on the collar, but if I can also swing that in front of the dog's nose, I'm taking advantage of the dog being aware of its surroundings and the natural inclination to not want to have its nose meet that leash and will instinctively pull back. So I can always pull up on the collar, but I find it's very effective to swing that leash in front of their nose. It kind of helps too when you say heel and you swing that leash in front of their nose. Then they sort of then can picture that invisible line that they shouldn't cross, because that leash is going along that line that where their nose would be, they need to stay behind that. So that's some of the techniques that I use in teaching how to heel. reinforcing commands. In this module, you're going to learn the really cool technique that I teach my customers when they're coming to a training program with me, and they always ask me.
Try that one more time. Confident.
Gotcha. Reinforcing commands. In this module, you're going to learn the typical process that I teach.
Oh.
Do we need it?
Yes.
Okay.
I just need to switch out.
Okay. Cool. We can keep rolling.
All right.
All right. Reinforcing commands. In this module, you're going to learn the process in which you can maintain and reinforce the training that you're going to be doing on a daily basis. The most common question that I get asked from people that I train their dogs and I work with them and I teach them, and I guess they feel like how do I maintain the training? So I came up with this idea of training every day, twice a day. You have to feed your dog, so training can take place at mealtime. And the best way to do this is when you're getting the food, you tell your dog to sit and stay. You give the hand signals, and reinforce with voice command. You put the food down, you say stay, and you pause. And then you say, okay. And the dog can eat the food. And then afterwards, you tell the dog to come. So all this takes place as fast as Labradors as dogs usually eat. Labs eat pretty quick. I know a lot of other breeds eat quick too, but if your dog's a slow eater, it's going to take a little bit longer. But as soon as the dog's finished, you tell the dog to come, you give the hand signal, the dog comes straight to you. They should sit down. That's reinforcing. If they don't, you reinforce the completed command by making them sit, and then you praise them. This happens twice a day. That will maintain all of the training that you're doing, and it will also give you a chance to further bond with your dog and to get a good understanding of how your dog is that day and where your dog is progressing in his or her training. So this is really crucial. So what I also have found, and the reason why I have recommended daily training at mealtime, is I would have this happen a lot where an owner would say to me, well, if I need to work with my dog for 30 minutes or an hour, I'll do it on the weekend. The weekend comes, the training doesn't take place, and by the second weekend, because that's generally when people will schedule a large amount of time to work with their dog, the second weekend happens to come by and the training doesn't take place again. Well, they've gone 2 weeks without working with their dog. So that's why it makes so much sense. You have to feed your dog anyway. Just at mealtime, go through the commands. You can even do the heel command. So after you have the dog sit and stay and you tell the dog to come, you can say heel, and from the seated position, you can pull your dog over by the collar and get the dog to do a little 180-degree turn and to sit beside you, and that's the heel command. You've gone through all 4 commands, sit, stay, come, and heel, at mealtime, and you're doing that twice a day. Your dog will be extremely well trained, and you're going to maintain the training, and then from there you can start adding in new commands or expanding upon what they've already learned. Final thoughts. So at this point, we've gone over how to teach your dog how to sit, stay, come, and heel. And the techniques that I use to achieve those commands, some of the little secrets that I've learned along the way over the last 20 years of training thousands of dogs. And what I hope now that you will kind of reflect on everything that you've learned.
What it really boils down to is being persistent and consistent. Like you want to say, all those secrets I've learned really boils down to this.
That's it. And what it really boils down to is being consistent and persistent, being firm, and making sure that you are disciplining your dog, but also praising your dog when your dog does the right thing. So often I find when an owner is working with their dog, they're always complaining or criticizing or disciplining their dog verbally, and they forget the most important part, which is to praise their dog. So in recapping, I would say don't forget that. It's very important. Make sure that you discipline and correct and you're firm in that, but also make sure that you're lavish in your praise when the time is necessary, and make sure that if you're teaching a new command, sit and stay, come and heel, whatever it happens to be, and you've gone through a lot of trials to get to the point where the dog is performing it, as soon as they perform it where you're happy, let the dog know. Grab him, rub on him, tell him that he's a good boy. So often I find that step is missed. So I'd say just encourage you to make sure that you're firm in your discipline and lavish in your praise, and have fun. I have a lot of fun working with dogs, especially when I have taken a puppy that doesn't know how to do something, and I teach that puppy how to do something. It's really fun to see the progress that they make and then the finished product. It's a lot of fun. And then after this training, you can then expand their training. You can build upon it. And there will be more modules that I'll be releasing that will help you do that. So, final thoughts. So up to this point, you've learned how to train your dog, how to sit, how to stay, how to come, and how to heel. Those 4 commands, super important. It's the basic training. From there, you can build upon it. Just remember, it all boils down to being persistent, consistent, and having lots of patience. And have fun with it too. Once you train a dog to obey you, and when you give that dog a command and it performs that command, it's going to be a lot of fun. So I encourage you to be persistent and stay consistent in the commands, using the same terminology, being very clear so that the command is enunciated correctly and loudly. Be firm and have lots of patience. When working with a puppy or even an older dog, sometimes they have a good day, sometimes they are not so good. And it can really be frustrating. Don't get stressed out. Just come back to it later. Let the dog have a nap. Come back to it later. So thank you for joining me, and I'll look forward to seeing you on other videos.
Cut. And action. Cut. All right, we're ready.
Remy, heel. Heel. Come on, heel. 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 There you go. Good girl. Good girl, Remy. Heel. Remy, heel. 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 Come on, heel. There you go. Good girl. Remy, heel. Good girl. Good girl.
Hi. All right, go ahead.
Remy, heel. Remy. Remy, heel. Remy, heel. 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 Remy. Remy, heel. 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 Come on. Heel. Heel. Wasn't very elegant, but that's the way that you do it. Stay. Good girl. Heel. Come on, Remy. Heel. 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 There you go. Heel. Good girl.
Whoa.
Good girl.
All right, we're live.
Do heel. Heel. Do heel. There you go. Heel. 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 Do. There you go. Good boy. Stay. Stay. Now, do you want me to...
In action.
Heel. There you go. Good boy. Good boy. Heel. Heel. Stay. Oh boy.
Alright, then come this way.
Good boy. Good boy. So see how he's sitting behind me? Yep. There you go. There you go. Yep. Yep. Heel. There you go. Good boy. Heel.
Tighten. Okay.
Heel. Heel. There you go. Good boy.
There we go.
Be ready.
Alright, and we're live.
Stay. Come. Good.
In action.
Stay. Stay. Sit. Stay. 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 Up. Good boy. Good boy, Duke. Good boy.
Alright, we're live.
Stay.
Is that enough slack for him to come?
No.
Okay.
This is stay. Stay. Head. Head. Sit. Stay. Stay. Do you still have me in the shot?
No.
Stay. Stay. Good boy. Stay.
Alright, we're live.
Come. Come. boy, Duke. Good boy.
And we're live.
Duke, sit. Good boy. Good boy. Good boy. Stay. Heel. Good boy, Duke. Good boy. Heel. There you go. Good boy, Duke. Heel. Boy, Jack. Yep. Yep. Heel. Heel. There you go. Hop. 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 Come here. Hop. Hop. Come here. Hop. Hop. There you go. Good girl. Good girl. There you go. Good girl, Polly. Good girl. Good girl. Stay. Stay. Polly. Hop. 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 Polly. Hop. Come here. Hop. Come on. Hop. 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 There you go. Hop. There you go. Good girl, Polly. Good girl. Good girl. Stay. Polly, hop. Polly. Polly, hop. 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 Come here. Hop. Hop. There you go. There you go. Good girl. Hop. There you go. Good girl. Good girl. Good girl. Stay.